or federal judge to say, no,
There we
we're not going
go.
to grant it to you. So that's just one theory. That's not fact in any way,
1
just my
a.m.
speculation.
Person, places, things can be
Monday,
searched.
the 23rd.
Under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, in order to get a search warrant, you need to put forth probable cause to a neutral magistrate and have that magistrate issue it. And that requires presenting some sort of evidence. The search warrant affidavit for this search warrant was issued by the Pima County Superior Court, and it is sealed. We sent an investigator to go and get it, and we're told that it was sealed. So one of our next steps will be to try to get that search warrant unsealed so that we can see what the purported basis for any
I
of
don't know why it
this
does that.
Do you have any idea? I mean, based on what they were asking Carlos, have you been able to sort of piece together why they thought he was involved?
I don't think they had any reason to think he was involved. My belief is that it's most likely this is his arrest, his unlawful detention, the search of his residence, his property, the seizure of his property, probably all goes to some electronic evidence that's really dubious. Something like,
Oh,
So what do you think, chat? You think that's what it was? Some sort of
going through
electronic
the,
evidence that's really dubious? Because here's the
I
thing.
found this on
It's
this
not what I said in regards to the
MacBook.
sketch.
I didn't even know I had
You think there was some
chess
sort of
games.
electronic thing?
I've lost 4 in a row,
So yeah, so
pathetically.
press 1 if you think there's some sort of electronic connection. Press 2 if you think it's something else.
cell phone pings, something like flock cameras. He's a delivery driver. I don't know that he was ever even in that area. And I think it's widely known by law enforcement that things like cell phone pings are incredibly inaccurate.
Knight G8 to F6.
They're very dependent on a lot of factors. And so I suspect that it's probably some combination of that and possibly some other sort of bizarre government triangulation, maybe using some kind of, surveillance database type software like Palantir, something like that.
What is that? What's that? I've never heard of that.
So Palantir is a software suite that's sold to the government that they use to cross-reference their own databases. So it's like intelligence gathering software. The military uses it. The FBI uses it. A lot of police agencies use it. And, it allows them to try to triangulate things. So they might be, I'm way out on a limb speculating right now, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if, they had some dubious cell phone ping, some really vague description of a vehicle, like a silver vehicle, and then they just cross-referenced it with Hispanic people who lived in Tucson or something.
Pawn E7 to E6.
The other possibility is, some kind of tip, confidential informant type of thing, but, I don't see what that would be.
When we met Josefina,
Knight B8 to C6.
she was saying he was a delivery driver.
Get your
And
2
I was
nights
wondering
out.
if maybe she delivered something on that street. And maybe they just went back and looked at all the cell phones that were in that area and then looked at the pictures and who might have had similar eyebrows, something like that,
That certainly crossed my mind, but I don't know that he was ever even on that street. So I don't know. It's very strange to me to see.
Pawn D7 to D5.
Maybe he's had a delivery around the area, and then somehow there's some sort of pin associated with that. Sure. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Just the kind of the surface the police created, where they clearly cast a shadow on the
Pawn E6 to E5.
Through their actions, identifying him as a quote-unquote person of interest, have really ruined his life right now, where he's having trouble maintaining employment. He was notified by his employer not to identify himself as being related to that employer. He's not getting work. And when he and his family go out into the community,
Awesome hockey
very
game.
small towns in Arizona,
USA,
they
USA.
feel like everybody's watching them, and people are. People are coming
Oh,
up to them. People
shoot.
are making statements to them. And, Carlos's children are afraid to go to school.
So Anita in the chat asked, did they ever take a look at Nancy's phone? I would say I'm sure they did, but what they found on it, I don't know. Because I think we saw that the phone was left at the home, right? And that's what the pacemaker was connected
They sucked
to.
everybody's phone up, all the data from 5 miles of the place. NSA. At your service.
Yeah. And then there was a second raid at the other house where there was no arrest there either. So we don't know if that's going to be a similar situation as Carlos, or I don't know if they're still investigating. It's kind of hard to sort out.
Well, I do know that with respect to the second raid, an attorney in Tucson named Christopher Shalepi has said that he represents that person as well as that person's mother, and that they're innocent. They had nothing to do with this. But again, you get met with this deafening silence from the sheriff's office and the sheriff, who seem to be quite comfortable going out and placing
Nobody likes the old
people
sheriff
that
of
have no
Pima
interest
County.
in clearing them after that happens.
Well, Chris Nanos.
Obviously retained you.
Nanos.
What's the next step?
So the first step
Oh, here we go.
is for Sheriff Nanos to come forward and admit that they messed up, that Carlos is innocent. They have no reason to believe that he has any connection.
They might be waiting a long time for that. For Sheriff Nanos to come up and say he made a mistake, they're wrong. I wouldn't hold my breath.
To this or any other.
Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets. My not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cacophonous cavalcade of
Pawnee 534.
out there.
What?
I've been reading about these monster storms that keep
You
slamming
little
into
bastard.
the eastern part of our country. And here in southern
Like the
Nevada,
battle
anyway,
starts
it's
right now, I guess.
Benito. We had, 3 or 4 days of cold
Jesus.
weather. I say cold, I mean in the 60s. Might have been down in the 50s at one point. 4 or 5 days of rain. Now it feels like time to lather on the suntan lotion. And I say that not to rub it in, literally or figuratively, but just saying it's a good night for most
I
of
like
the
this
country.
guy.
Stay inside, curl up, and listen to the radio. We've got some tales and troubles out there underway in the wilderness. Some tough times for multiple species, both in the wild and in domestic situations. Animal welfare is one of those few issues in America that's nonpartisan. No matter your political party or your political stripe, people left and right and in the middle care about animal welfare. Dogs and cats and birds and horses, exotic big cats, elephants, kangaroos. Tonight, we're going to check in on how things are going for some of these species who are literally in the crosshairs of humans for one reason or another. I'm going to start with the war on wolves. If you thought that one was essentially over because of all the positive ecological and economic benefits from the reintroduction of wolves years ago, well, it is far from over. In fact, things are getting dire for wolves after nearly a century of near eradication efforts. Returning to the program tonight is my go-to animal welfare guy, Wayne Pacelli, president of the Center for a Humane Economy. We're going to talk about wolves, bison, owls, wild mustangs, pigs, chickens, kangaroos, many other species and issues worth talking about tonight. And we'll start that in just a couple of minutes from now. In the second half this evening, more animal mayhem, but of a much different type. We're not sure if this is caused by humans or what. It started, at least in the media, back in the 1960s, with the bizarre mutilation of a horse, and then it spread. Different states, different species, same kind of incisions, mostly the same kind of mystery aircraft.
Mutilations.
Puzzled and frightened
Horses? I thought it was
and
cows.
cover up. And where do these things stand now? The mystery mutilators are still at it, And despite more than 10,000 incidents, not one person has ever been caught doing this.
Wow.
Katie Page is a longtime investigator of these and related phenomena, as she lived on one of the weirdest, most enigmatic epicenters of these oddities, a property comparable in every way to Skinwalker Ranch. Katie will join us 2 hours from now. A couple of news items to mention first. The U.S. State Department is warning Americans who are traveling in Mexico to stay inside. Shelter
Mexico.
wherever they are in place. Earlier today, the Mexican army says it killed one of the main leaders of a massive drug cartel. That set off all kinds of violence.
Yeah, I'm blowing shit up, setting fires everywhere, killing people.
Now to other tourism centers, the warning.
There's a bunch of National Guard got shot up.
Ensenada, all kinds of major tourism locations in Mexico. Looks pretty nasty from the videos I have seen. As many of you likely know, this past week was quite a time for the UFO topic. A podcaster did this interview with former President Barack Obama, and it really caused some sparks to fly. The former president was asked if he thinks aliens are real, and he said yes. And then he added strangely, but he doesn't think there are any of them underground at Area 51. He quickly walked back the statement, adding that he hasn't seen any evidence of aliens visiting Earth, at least not while he was in office, which prompted President Trump to respond, saying Obama likely crossed a line and speaking about classified matters. Well, exactly what was classified there, I wondered. And then Trump himself by saying he's going to order all federal agencies, the Department of War in particular, to release whatever they have on UFOs, UAPs, ETs, alien life. It's not at all clear what is going to happen and when, but wow, did this get the juices flowing and tongues wagging? There are obstacles needless to say to disclosure. The people who've kept these secrets,
Bishop C8 to G4.
and other types of evidence and information are not going to surrender this stuff without a fight, even if the president is on the other side of that fight. Can't wait to see where that goes. We'll be watching it pretty closely. Our webmaster Lex Lonehood and I have pulled together our usual assortment of items and oddities culled from news media around the world. We call it Naps News. You can find it on the Coast to Coast AM website. And of course, we have a pair of new pieces about this give and take, Obama and Trump, and where it might
Bishop G4 takes F3.
Oh no.
About these kind of pronouncements, anytime you have the current and the
boy, that was a screw up.
UFOs, I think that's a positive thing for the subject in terms of being taken seriously. Also in Naps News, new and exciting research about animal communication. How they communicate with each other in ways that we humans can't even hear. Pretty cool story.
No.
There's a disappointing report about the biggest
what the fuck?
Trees in the Amazon rainforest being targeted by interests who want to basically clear huge segments of that critical ecosystem. Oh, and some exciting new research into consciousness, if that's of interest to you.
Thank you.
Those stories and more in Naps News. While you're on the website,
Bishop F3 takes H1.
Oh man.
About 15 cents a day. If you subscribe for a year, it gives you access to a huge archive of programs and interviews. You can listen anytime you want, as often as you want. It's a good deal. So too is a subscription to Beyond Belief, which is George Norrie's television program, wherein he interviews fascinating guests, similar to what George does so well here on the radio. And with that, let's assume the position. Bring in the dog and the cat and maybe a wolfhound, similar to that character who made such big news in the Winter Olympics. Put on a pot of
Bishop H1 to F3.
flannel jammies and your toes into your best bunny slippers. Toss another log on the fire. Plop yourself down in a comfy spot. Turn down the lights and turn up the radio. In a moment, the war against wolves and the fight for animal welfare with Wayne Pacelli. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM.
Wow. Find out how the animals are doing tonight.
One of the things that we anticipate getting is any video or recordings of that interview. And, that might give us more information once we have that. We do think it's going to be difficult to get it. And so it may be some time before we know the details of that.
Yeah, with the FBI involved, and I just know from the work I do, it can be very difficult getting those records once the feds are involved.
When they handcuffed him, placed him in the back of that car, made clear he was not free to leave, and held him for 5 to 7 hours in that fashion, I think it's just undisputable that that constitutes an arrest under the United States Constitution. My understanding is that at some point he was read his rights, but my understanding is that that was later on. It's also my understanding that he asked for an attorney.
Bishop F8 to
and was not provided
E7.
with one. So I hope that answers the question. It can sometimes be hard to make the distinction between what constitutes a detention and what constitutes an arrest. But usually if it's a matter, almost always if it's a matter of hours, that's going to end up being an arrest. And so my understanding is the only thing that hasn't been returned is Carlos's funds of the things that were taken. What happened is, Carlos was living with his in-laws, and that is where they executed the search warrant. And the rest of the family was caught in the crossfire of what we view as an illegal detention and an illegal search. And, in those moments that evening and early into the morning, you can see the terror in her face, that she's been isolated from her family, that she's unable to figure out what's going on, and that police have entered her house and essentially kicked her out. I just think Americans of all political stripes should be horrified by this, because it is an abuse of government power. And
Bishop F3 takes E2.
The government to remain silent, Sheriff Manos to remain silent.
And this is a good point by him. Whether you think you're guilty or not, it's about
Queen
the
takes
principle.
bishop.
You don't want people to be able to detain you on flimsy to no.
Pawn D5 to
I think
D4.
that's true. I think that's a good point by the lawyer.
Oh, you.
About its effects, and when he could easily come forward and say, hey, we had information, we realized that information was bad, we realized that Carlos had no involvement.
Knight C6 takes
and
D4.
that's really what we would expect a responsible leader in our community, a responsible sheriff to come forward and say.
So that was attorney Jesse Showalter, who was representing Carlos. I'll stay in touch with him. You guys remember I interviewed his mother-in-law when the raid happened, and I was out there, and she was so convinced that he wasn't involved from the very beginning. And they had taken her cell phone too. And, I actually kind of believed her then, but I just thought to myself, well, there's probably a lot I don't
Knight
know.
D4 takes C2. Check.
She said, Nancy Guthrie. He wasn't in Tucson the night she went missing, and it turns out, it seems she was right. He was not involved based on everything that we've heard. So I'll continue to dig into that. You heard the lawyer, Jesse, explain that they're trying to get the search warrant. I've also been trying to get the search warrant. A lot of that stuff is sealed. But once we can get those documents, it'll tell us exactly what authorities had to justify doing that search warrant, because the judge had to sign off on it. So sealed for now, but eventually hopefully it'll be unsealed, especially as they really move on onto different leads. Let me go through also, this was the latest update that we got from the Pima County Sheriff's Office. In terms of neighborhood activity, they say detectives and agents are back today in the Guthrie neighborhood canvassing as part of the investigation.
Knight C2 takes A1.
That no additional details will be provided, but we know they were out here yesterday. I told you guys how they've changed the traffic pattern on Nancy Street. They put a bunch of cones out and closed off one of the lanes.
Queen D8 to D3. Check.
Gloves from the area and analysis is part of the investigation. Specific details about these pieces of evidence will not be shared publicly. It remains an active investigation. They're saying that there have been no changes to resources in the investigation. There was one report, I think it was from ABC, that said that they may start to peel back resources as time goes on.
Pawn E4 takes D3. Check.
There may be fluctuations day to day based on investigative leads. Several hundred law enforcement personnel remain dedicated to the case. This will remain an active investigation.
Rook A8 to D8. Check.
All leads are exhausted. DNA, they gave us an update, but really the latest update is what I told you at the beginning of this episode from the sheriff, that they're having challenges with the DNA, which isn't good news. There was some reporting about a helicopter over a landfill, and I was actually tracking it.
We heard about this yesterday, right? But this had no
Castle Kingside.
The helicopter in the landfill.
Helicopter tracking apps, and you can see it doing a grid search over a landfill just about 20 minutes from here. We went out to the landfill and were told there that they didn't think it had anything to do with the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and now the sheriff's office confirmed the private aerial activity near a landfill was not related to the investigation. And then I already told you about the private search parties basically saying that they appreciate the concern, but
guard dogs stand their ground wards off 90% of wolf depredations against livestock, in the rare cases where it occurs. And cattle and sheep are killed by weather, they're killed by lightning, they're killed by disease. And for every livestock animal, every sheep or calf killed by a wolf, many more are killed by coyotes. So I just think it's a disproportionate, irrational response. I don't quite get it, and I think you've latched onto it, George, as usual. It's just something kind of deep in the bones. It's not on the merits of the present threats.
Damn
I
it.
read this is back 10 years after the wolves were reintroduced in the northern Rockies. 1,904 wolves were in the Rocky Mountain West. 1,900 wolves, 1.6 million cattle. Wolves killed something like 148 cows in that year, and the states compensated the ranchers. If you can show the wolf killed it, you get your money back. Doesn't seem like it's a really big dent in one.
Knight F6 to E4.
You're so right. I mean, again, the ratios here are something to think about. I mean, looking at the real threats to cattle and sheep, wolves are way, way, way down the list. As you know, in absolute terms, it's a very small number. And you have responses to it. Guard dogs, what's called flagry. There are herd management practices that you can conduct. Obviously, you have people who are working with the animals all the time and can deter them. But our government, as you know, George, has a whole control.
Rook D8 takes D2. Check.
Department of Agriculture. They are literally hired guns that the taxpayer pays for to kill these animals. What the trophy hunters are doing and what these hunting programs are doing is they're going after unoffending wolves. They're going after wolves that haven't been near cattle or sheep. They haven't bothered them at all. Many of them are older, mature wolves who are very skilled at killing traditional prey, like elk or deer or moose.
Bishop E7 to A3. Check.
Is you lower the age structure of a population. You have more juveniles who may be less skilled at killing traditional prey. They may be the ones who stray and kill a sheep or a calf. So when you disrupt the social structure of a wolf community, the wolf pack, you're really creating an ideal circumstance to accentuate the risks, the very remote risks, the very limited
Rook
risks
F8 to D8.
So again, on a rational basis, this whole thing
double rook. Death.
Well, the other force involved in this are hunters who have argued a long time that reintroducing wolves, well, you're killing elk and deer. That's bad for hunters. And it's actually the opposite of that's true. I mean, Yellowstone, the studies that have been on Yellowstone show that reintroducing wolves helped the population of those big ungulates, I guess they're called.
Well, George,
Rook D2 to D1. Check.
How, because we don't have predators, we have too many elk or we have too many deer, and therefore the hunters need to play that role of limiting the populations. Well, when you have wolves, that's exactly what they do. They have evolved with these animals so they don't wipe them out, the prey species.
Rook D1 to C1. Checkmate.
And, they also play an incredible role, George, in limiting disease.
I forgot about that pawn. Or that rook.
It's like mad cow disease.
Jesus.
We heard about that a quarter century ago when basically prions, which is an infectious
lost
protein,
another one to AI.
brains of these animals, and they basically exhibit symptoms like we would see in a human condition with severe Alzheimer's. So the animals become disoriented, they become very vulnerable, and it's an always fatal disease. There's no cure. What happens is the wolves
not much
and
going
also the
on.
lions selectively remove the animals infected by this infectious prion.
Nancy's still missing.
Wasting disease. It's something that, again, evolution
is still building up
vulnerabilities in the animals. And if you look at a map, George,
What is
now
it,
we
the
have chronic
22nd?
wasting disease in 34 provinces and states in North America.
Oh,
Where you have wolves,
4 more days will be a
disease. Where you
full
don't have
no
wolves,
moon
it's
in
rampant. And
Iran.
some hunting groups even think that chronic wasting disease
Time
is
to
such
get
a
'em.
severe threat that we're going to lose deer and elk entirely in the next 50
The USA
years.
works best in
Wolves
total
prune
darkness.
the diseased animals from the population. And these prions, it's remarkable. After they kill the deer or the elk, the prion
Well, there's
stays
the back
alive.
door
It's
shot,
an
the garage
unconscious
door of
protein that's
the
active
Nancy's
even
house.
after it kills the animal. It can live in the grass. The
They
only
got a
thing
drone,
that
people are
deactivates the
standing
prion
there.
is going through the gastrointestinal system of a wolf or a mountain lion. It's just nature's way of controlling disease,
They
balancing
keep showing the
populations.
guy with the
Nature
gloves at the
knows
door,
best.
front
This
door,
is an irrational, inhumane,
Mexican pistol.
despicable war on wolves. We should have learned from our history that we nearly wiped them out. We have 340 million people in the United States. We have 7,000 gray wolves. George, you and I could name a small town in New Mexico or Texas with 7,000 people. We would call that a tiny rural town with 7,000 people clustered, over a few square miles. Wolves are ranging over hundreds of millions of acres, and there are only 7,000 of them. What sort of warped view do we have on this whole situation to say that there are too many wolves?
I guess I was surprised by the effect of the reintroduction of wolves to, say, Yellowstone and other ecosystems, because I don't think anybody saw it coming, how it affected so much. I mean, by moving deer and elk around, they can't just stand around waiting for a hunter to come and shoot it out the window or something, as has been in the past, not in Yellowstone, but in other areas. But they have to keep moving, so they don't stand in one place, eat the same plants. It's allowed these things to grow back. It's affected Yellowstone and other ecosystems in incredibly dramatic ways that I don't think anybody could quite predict.
No, I don't think anyone quite saw it so dramatically. This was a case example. Wolves are a native species to the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Those elk and deer inside the park were not subjected to human hunting. And, they were standing around. They also, were growing in number. Wolves, put a cap on their numbers. They kept them moving. They didn't allow them to congregate in riparian areas, the areas where rivers and streams create so much life, so much vegetation. And, the animals can trample that vegetation. There can be erosion of the soil that can create silt in the rivers. It can make them more turgid. It can have some adverse effects on the ecosystem. Wolves are
I gotta
beneficial
find my
controlling
old pair of
disease,
glasses,
controlling
I'll
movements,
tell you
controlling
that.
numbers. Yes, they're a threat to livestock and sheep.
Well, that's
but a
about
very
it
minimal
for
threat, and there are ways to further
early
minimize
Monday
those
morning.
threats. Random killing of wolves who were killed not for food. I mean,
Sounds
who's
like the
eating a
wolves
wolf?
are
It's
doing
the
better,
equivalent
doesn't it?
of eating a
Eating
dog.
that milk and
When you're
deer.
a hunter and you're consuming a deer
Alright,
you've shot or an elk you've
we'll
shot,
try a game
in a world
later.
where we meet and where we get
Good
animals from
luck.
factory
We'll see you
farms who
later.
have miserable lives
Thanks
every
for
day, you can make
subscribing.
a moral
Thanks for
argument for
watching.
killing one of those animals.